I designed my dream bathroom and honestly, I love it. It has these wall-to-wall finger tiles, it has a light-up mirror, it even has a shower in the ceiling. But the one thing that it is severely lacking is storage. All of our toiletries have been living in little boxes on the windowsill, which is not the serene vibe I'm going for. But the only place I can think of to add a bit of closed storage is this slither of space behind the door. I honestly thought this was too narrow to be able to fit anything useful in, but then I realized that that insulation there is actually surplus to requirements, so I could take that out and regain a little bit of space. That still only leaves me with about 7 inches between the architrave and the wall, but with a clever design, I think that is plenty to work with. So I sat down with my tablet to draw up the idea. On the bottom, there's going to be a slim medicine cabinet with adjustable shelves and a dedicated tip-down drawer for toilet paper storage. Then on the top is going to be an even shallower unit with glass shelves, and we'll use that to store our extensive nail polish collection. I think this is going to look really beautiful reflected in the mirror and add a bit of color and life to the room. So I am really excited about this plan. Let's get started making the bottom unit. Okay. A side effect of chronic fatigue is that I'm forced to spend so much more time thinking about a project than actually working on it. And that can be great because it means I'm really confident in my decision making, the techniques I'm using, because I've researched it a lot. But the flip side is that because I'm so focused on being energy efficient and exerting as little energy as possible, the ultimate solution to that is to make something really minimal. You know, I could slap some plain overlay doors on this and call it a day, but I don't want design to be compromised just because my energy is limited. If I'm only ever doing the easiest thing possible for a build, it's all going to come out really boring, and that's not where my joy comes from. So for this, I am doing all new stuff to me. So we're going to do inset shaker doors, proper shaker doors, and I am going to add this staff beading all along the inside rim. So this will look like a very beautiful traditional inset cabinet. I'm still going to do all of that in the most energy efficient way possible, but I'll come out with this really special bespoke piece of furniture and I'm going to learn some new skills along the way. A couple things to note about this. It was fairly simply constructed, but I did glue this little lip on this edge, and that is because the architrave will be covering this far side. So I just wanted to add a bit there so that there's the same gap all the way around. Also, this piece here is covering where the skirting is going to be. Often if you make base cabinets, you will make a separate plinth that goes underneath and brings the whole thing up, but I'm really trying to maximize the space I have. So we've got secret extra bonus toilet roll storage in the bottom of there. So the first step is mitring this beading to go along the inside, and then I'm going to glue and nail it in, and then we will start working on the doors. Cutting this tiny delicate beading on the mitre saw is very annoying. Because it doesn't have a flat top, I can't flip it over to cut the mitre in the other direction, so I have to swing my saw back and forth, and it is very hard to get a perfect 45 degrees. So I decided instead this was the perfect opportunity for me to build a simple mitre sled for my table saw. I made this over the course of a day out of scrap I already had in the workshop, and now it's much easier and much safer for me to make these 45-degree cuts. And I also made this tiny jig to keep the beading aligned as I installed it. The beading on this cabinet came out looking so good. I also got this piece of hardwood that I'm going to use as a topper. I wanted something slightly thicker and that I could route in some decorative detail for. So I'm going to take these two things home and get that top scribed so it perfectly fits in. But for now, let's turn our attention to the doors. I've made fake shaker doors on this channel before, which is where you take all of these decorative pieces and you just glue them on top of a plain back. But although that's very DIY friendly, it is quite annoying to get the edges to look nice where the two materials meet. So today we are doing a different technique. Traditional shaker doors would be made with tongue and groove joinery. So you would cut a groove out of all of the inside pieces where you could slot a panel in, and then to make these two edges meet, you'd cut a groove from this edge and a tongue from that edge, and they would slide together. I'm going to do a slightly easier version of that doesn't require you having a matching set of router bits. I'm just going to use a single slot cutting router bit. So instead of cutting a tongue out this bit, we just cut another groove, and then we glue in little pieces called loose tenons instead. This is only a little bit different from making shaker doors with tongue and groove joinery, but it is preferable in a bunch of ways. One, I don't have to buy an expensive set of router bits when I already have this slot cutting bit, and I don't have to be swapping them in and out of my router. And thirdly, I can cut these pieces to be the size of the door I want and not have to worry about making the rail extra long because I'm going to cut that tongue out of it. So now I've got all my pieces ready to route and assemble. My rails are 60mm wide out of the 80mm MRMDF that I've been using on the whole thing. And then I have this 6mm MRMDF for the middle portions, although I did have 2 perfect pieces of scrap to go in these bits. So they are actually beech veneered MDF, which will work just fine. Right, let's get slotting. I set up the bit on my router table to cut halfway through the material. The depth of the cut on this bit is 1/4 inch, which is equivalent to 6.3mm, and that gives me the perfect amount of wiggle room and glue room on my 6mm panels. I added grooves to 3 sides of each of the rails and just the inner side on each of the stiles. And then I did a dry fit of all the pieces before adding the glue into the grooves and adding those loose tenons. I learned this shaker door method from Peter Millard, and I will link his brilliant video below if you want to hear more of the technical details. I'm glad I brought this home for a dry fit, because it doesn't. This is my problem with always trying to be millimetre perfect. I just don't allow enough leeway. I really need to learn that lesson. Basically, the unit is the right width, and it would fit entirely in there. But this wall is at a slight angle, so it's just catching over here as I try and insert it. I don't think I need to change the width of the entire unit. I just need to make this edge a lot slimmer. And that is fine because this bit will be covered with architrave and then we will have the top on here. So when I take this back to the workshop, I will just plane down that edge and that side a bit. Dry fits, worth their weight in gold. And then I have this top piece. It doesn't have to be scribed at the back. It doesn't have to be scribed on this little bit because the top unit will cover that. But it does need to be scribed on this little edge here because that will be exposed. So I got my deep hole pencil and this tracer pro scribe thing, and I've drawn a line here parallel to the wall, and that does show what an acute angle that wall is at. I partially brought this home to make sure it would fit, but I also wanted to see it in the space so I could have an easier time visualizing the top half and make some decisions about it. Okay, after a lot of toing and froing, I think I've figured out how I want to build this top unit. So I'm going to do something similar to the bottom in that I'm going to have a 6mm MRMDF back and 18mm sides, but I'm going to add little batons into the sides. And those are going to be the shelf supports for the glass pieces. So that will be the main unit that sits in here. So it'll just be back, sides and top. And then I will do essentially like a face frame of just this staff bead and a little chunk of this 18mm on the side to give it the same look as this. I'm going to make the actual shelf portion 50mm deep, like 2 inches, which is deep enough that it can like comfortably sit these, but it won't protrude very far into the room. It's going to protrude 20mm-ish, like around an inch. By the way, I keep saying measurements in metric or imperial or both. Which do you understand? My brain sort of works in either, so I just kind of like flip between them randomly. But I feel like most people would just only understand one or the other, so I'm sorry. If you are ever making a spatial decision and you have access to the space, for God's sake, get yourself some tape and throw it up on the wall, because it is so much easier to make decisions when you can actually visualize what you're working on. These shelves are a perfect 100mm separated and will have an even gap between all of them, which is magic. I think I am happy with this. So I now have everything I need to proceed. Let's take these 2 things back to the workshop and I will get them trimmed down to actually fit in here and we can build the top. So just so nice to see how it's gonna look. I'm gonna clean these things up and I'm just gonna sit on the loo and stare at it for a bit in happiness. Oh, this is gonna be so nice when it's done. Hello, we are back in the workshop. I realised my idea to shave down the side of the cabinet to get it to fit is very dumb when I could just take the plasterboard off that section of wall. That will be much easier to do, but I didn't have the tools for that at home, so I will do that when I install the unit. Now we can get started making the top unit. So I went to B&Q to buy some moulding to use as the batons on the side. I didn't want to just use like some squared off pieces of timber because you will be able to see it, and I thought it's a nice opportunity for something a little bit more decorative. But they didn't have the piece of moulding that I was hoping for, so I got 4 instead. And we're gonna do a little test on this like scrap piece from the doors and see what we like the look of. I want the batons to be kind of recessed in the side piece because that will make the joint much more strong. For this test piece, I'm going to use the depth stop on my Mitre saw to create those grooves for these to sit in. I finished making my little test strip for the battens. I actually did the bottom one again because I felt like this one was in a bit too deep. But yeah, I brought this home. I also glued on a little strip of MDF onto the side and brought home this spare bit of staff beading because this is what the front face will actually look like when I finished it, and I could get a much better idea of how these battens will be disguised with that beading. I felt like the top one was too decorative and this one looked a little too bulky. So I think I'm gonna go with the scotia, which is what you would usually use to like trim out the edge of unfinished flooring. But I just like that it has a gentle scoop here. And I should be able to recess it enough so that the batten doesn't come out too much and interfere with me actually getting the glass shelves in. I also woke up in the middle of the night with a fear that all of these glass shelves are going to come smashing down because they are quite wide and only supported at the sides. And when I looked it up, it seems obvious that a center support is definitely important to give these shelves the stability. So I've been trying to think what I could add to the middle of the back panel to add that support. I thought maybe the shelf pins like I'm using in the bottom unit because that will be really little, but then it just won't look as bespoke. So then I thought, what if I make little supports out of the same moldings? And I built this tiny thing. This was actually really hard to make, even with the Mitre sled, because I needed to have the kind of wrong side of each of the pieces. But I think it looks cute. It's a little wide, so I'm gonna make it a little bit slimmer, but I will be making 8 little versions of these and screwing them in the back panel as extra support for the shelves. But before that, let's make these side pieces. So I'm going to do the 2 side pieces together as one long block, and then I can cut it in half and know that they're going to match up perfectly. Also for this, I used the depth stop on my Mitre saw to cut the grooves, but I've now realized it'd be much easier to use the table saw and a cross-cutting sled because that will give me much more precision and control. I have a cold and I have rested for a few days, but I am bored and I really want to get this done. So here we are. I have all of the pieces to assemble the top now, but before I screw this together, I am going to put on the baby shelves because that'll be easier to do while this is flat. I drove in each of the screws so the little tip was just coming through the top, and that made it much easier for me to align each of the shelves as I was screwing them in. They each got a little dab of glue so they don't twist back and forth, and then I cleaned up the excess with a little rag. Each of the supports had like a weird hole at the top just because of the shape of the molding, so I filled that in. Now we can screw the rest of it together. Instead of using a right angle clamp or some kind of jig to hold these 2 in position while I'm screwing, I just use my nail gun and tack in a couple nails, and that is plenty to hold it while I'm adding screws. Oh, that is very off. What the hell has happened here? So I've lined the bottom edges up and the top of this board is very, very skew-whiffed. Did I just cut it at the wrong angle? I'm hoping that it's just the backboard that's off rather than the sides. The sides can't be off. It was literally one piece that I sawed in half. That's 9, 3, 6. And this is 9, 2, oh, I just marked it wrong as I was sawing it. I marked it a centimetre off. So this is just at the wrong angle, which is funny, but it actually really doesn't matter. I will nail this in, and then I will just maybe sand down this edge so it doesn't catch, because this is going to be behind everything and no one will see it, so no one has to know. Nobody has to know. Will I include this in the video? Ooh. Just check that the shelves line up if I haven't messed that up. You tell me. Does it look good? Oh, that is perfect. Who needs the other side to be right? Okay, I do actually need to screw in the other side though. Now we have to add that little face frame with the little staff bead trim. So I've cut the pieces for this. The right hand side I'm going to secure on now, but the top and the left hand side, I've decided I actually would rather not secure them now, and then I can properly scribe them to the wall, because I think at least the left hand wall is kind of wonky, and I don't want to put my perfect cabinet in there and then there'd be a big gap on the side that I need to fill. So I'm going to leave these out, but I will add the staff beading to them here in the workshop. Same with the top as well, I left it extra high. I think the ceiling's fairly level, but who knows, and I'd rather prepare for the worst than expect the best. I'm going to get all of the beading glued and nailed in place, and then I'm going to prime this piece, and then I'm going to go home and feel sorry for myself. Now we've got to finish off the bottom cabinet. The last time you saw the doors, I was gluing them up. So since then I sawed off the excess of those loose tenons with a flush saw, and I filled in any gaps and sanded them nice and smooth. I actually made each of them the size of the openings, and then I've been able to go back and forth with the table saw to cut them down ever so slightly so I have the perfect margin around all of these. One of the reasons I've been quite intimidated by this project is that you have a much smaller margin for error when it comes to inset doors, because if they're even off by like 1/2 mil, it will be really visible. So I'm very glad that I made them oversized and then I could trim them down. So I've got this 1.5 to 2 mil gap around everything. And to make sure of that, I use playing cards, because each of these cards is almost exactly 0.3 millimeters thick. So I used 4 or 5 cards to wedge in all of these panels, but I did underestimate how many of these I needed. I only brought 1 pack. The next thing to do here is to install the hardware. I want to do that before I paint it all, because if I mess anything up, it's much easier for me to repair it this stage. And it also means that I can like draw pencil marks over this as I install things to make sure they are just right. I'm going to be using these flush hinges, which are perfect for something like this, because you don't have to like chisel out or route out a little recess for them to fit in like you would have to do with butt hinges. They are 1.5 mil thick on their own, so they will be able to go right in there, but also still have the look of traditional hinges. I really like the idea of being able to see the barrel from the outside. And because we're not using modern like soft close hinges, I will also need to install some of these little magnet catches on the inside to keep the doors closed. I've also got these kind of stay hinge things, which I will hopefully be able to use on the bottom door to stop it opening more than 90 degrees. But I'm not entirely sure how this is going to work out. My backup plan is to just use some hook eyes and some chain to hold this door at the right depth. Now I have the perfect margins around all of these doors, I can mark up where the hinges are going to go, and hopefully when I install them, they will be in the perfect position. It works! I put a door on, it opens and closes, and it has the right margins around it. Wow, putting on all that hardware took a lot longer than I expected, but it's definitely a process you shouldn't rush, because if you mess it up, like I did with the screw holes right here, it takes a lot longer to fix. But I'm very happy with what I've achieved now. Wow, I made this. That's so cool. Now I'm going to take off all of the hardware we've just installed and bag it and label it, and then I can get my first coat of primer on this. After 2 coats of Zinsser 123 sanding in between, I could go in with my top coat. I decided to use a colour by Frownball called Cord, and it's a dark, rich, creamy colour. I wanted something that would provide a bit of contrast to the green tiles, but still feel really neutral and calm. And something about this colour just felt very traditional and befitting of the style of joinery I'm doing for this project. Painting around all of the tiny shelf supports was really annoying, but in the end it came out looking nice and smooth. After 3 layers of that top coat, I reinstalled all of the hardware and packed it all up to bring home. The first step of the installation was taking off that bit of plasterboard on the left-hand wall that was causing me problems when I did my dry fit. I made quick work of that with my multi-tool so I could get the base cabinet fitted quite easily and replace the architrave on that side. I leveled it out and then screwed through it into the studs. Next up was the little hardwood topper. I used my jigsaw to cut a notch out where it met the tile wall and a notch out where it met the architrave, and then I could screw that down from underneath. The top unit was a little more challenging. I thought I'd give myself plenty of margin for error, but it was just a bit too tight and kept catching on the top right hand side. I used my circular saw to take out a bit of material on that corner, and then I managed to gently hammer it into place. Next was scribing the rest of the frame for the top piece, so I used my jigsaw and sander to get that to meet nice and tightly with the ceiling and the wall, and I secured that with some glue and some brad nails. Then I added skirting to the unit, I caulked all of the edges, and after many rounds of touch-up paint, I was finally ready to add the glass shelves. I got these pieces cut to size at my local mirror and glass shop. It cost about £50 for all 8 pieces and to have them polished on the front, which I think is pretty reasonable. It's also quite a happy coincidence that the colour of this glass, this is just standard like 6mm float glass, that kind of bluey, grey, greeny colour is really similar to my tiles actually, so they look really beautiful together. The last thing we have to do is install our knobs on the base cabinet. I need you to know that my dream hardware for this cabinet is from Mitre. 2 little oval knobs up here and a bar across the bottom in polished nickel. It would look so beautiful, but that would cost £140, which I'm simply not going to spend on this. So instead we have these cheap little polished chrome knobs. These are still really cute and I think they will look nice, but they don't have that like weighty feel that good hardware has. So I'm going to install these, and if in the future I win the lottery, I can replace these with something a bit nicer. Let's get this cleared up, let's get some nail polish in the shelves, and then I can show you what a huge change we've made here and reflect a bit on this project. I am so chuffed with how this came out. I love that I took my nail polish that was just like hidden away in a box somewhere and made it this gorgeous display. I did end up taking off this bottom shelf to give a bit more room for sort of display items. I always thought I might do that, but I didn't want to like guess at how much space I wanted at the bottom. So I thought I would just put the shelves evenly spaced and then take that one out if I needed to. I love that I have some dedicated storage in this room now, and it's occupying a space that really would have been hard to utilize without a super custom solution like this. So I want to thank my patrons for helping enable me to make super custom builds like this. With my health as it is, this took me over a month to make. So if you like content like this and want to see more of it in the world, please consider supporting me on Patreon. I would really appreciate the support. And that is it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope it's made you maybe reconsider like an awkward corner you have in your house that's underserving you, and that with a bit of DIY, maybe not to this extent, you could add some utility to it. Next up on this channel, I will be tackling the rest of this room. So follow me on Instagram if you'd like to see some sneak peeks of that. And I hope you have a wonderful week. Bye.